I was married to a deeply problematic man named Ron 2 years ago. I don't use this term lightly or out of spite. It's the only word that accurately describes how toxic and draining he was as a partner. He was, without a doubt, the most emotionally, mentally, and financially exhausting person I have ever been involved with. The worst part is that I was so blinded by love and hope at the time that I gave him my all. My parents want me to support my sister's marriage to her ex-husband, who mistreated me. Ron and I dated for 3 years before getting married, during which time he never managed to hold down a proper job, which was frustrating. But at least back then he seemed to be trying. He would take on odd jobs here and there and claim he was working towards something better. It feels almost unbelievable now to say that I poured my blood, sweat, and tears into making our relationship work, only for him to take without giving anything back. I was young, and I believed that his ambition would eventually lead somewhere. But life threw us a curveball when I discovered I was pregnant. We weren't even trying, so I didn't even have time to consider my options before Ron began pressuring me to get married. He claimed that he wanted to do the right thing for me and the child at the time, which felt like a noble and romantic gesture because I was already emotionally invested in him. And I wanted to believe in the dream of creating a happy family together. But if our relationship had flaws before the marriage, they turned into huge gaps almost immediately after we were married. The little effort Ron had been making to improve our relationship before vanished completely, and his true colors started to show. He seemed to believe that getting married gave him a free pass to stop trying altogether. I was pregnant, working full-time, and desperately trying to keep us afloat despite my condition. I took on the responsibility for all our bills, household expenses, and everything else that came with getting ready for a baby. Ron began spending every penny he earned either gambling or drinking. This was a daily occurrence, and he would stay out until the wee hours of the morning, hanging out with random people at bars. I kept telling myself that things would get better, and that Ron would wake up to his duties eventually, but I was mistaken. He never assisted me. One night, I woke up feeling extremely ill, and I realized I was bleeding. I felt it running down my thighs. I knew deep down that something was seriously wrong, so my first instinct was to call Ron for assistance, but he was not home as usual. I called him several times in the hopes that he would come and help me, but when he did, he flatly refused to take me to the hospital, telling me it was probably nothing and that I should not overreact. He reprimanded me for being dramatic when he was out with his friends, and I realized that I couldn't rely on him. Even in a life-threatening situation, I had no choice but to drive myself to the hospital, shaking with pain and fear. The doctors confirmed my worst fear, that I had miscarried, losing the baby I had been nurturing and dreaming about. I felt like I couldn't breathe and didn't know what to do. And to make things worse, Ron blamed me for the loss when he learned about my miscarriage. I was already drowning in guilt, questioning every decision I had made during my pregnancy, and here was the man who was supposed to be my partner adding salt to my deepest wounds by implying that God had taken the child away from me and given it to someone more deserving. He even suggested that I was somehow to blame for my body failing, or, worse, that I had done something to cause it. I cried for hours in bed after my miscarriage, unable to even get out of bed to go to work. Ron didn't try to comfort me or help me deal with the loss. Instead, he made me feel worse by acting disgusted whenever he saw my face. Despite everything I was going through, I knew we needed the money, so I tried to divert my attention with work. After Ron lost his job because his company was downsizing, our situation worsened instead of getting better. Instead of using this setback as motivation to find another job or make any meaningful contribution to our household, he simply gave up and began spending all of his time at home playing video games. He would leave trash and dirty dishes all over the place, turning our house into a pigsty, and then act as though he didn't have any responsibility to clean it. He didn't even try to help out around the house during the bare minimum months of living like this, which had a severe negative impact on me emotionally and physically. I felt stuck in a never-ending cycle of frustration. Despite knowing that I was sick and completely exhausted, Ron insisted that I cook for him, clean up after him, and attend to all of his needs. No matter how worn out or ill I felt, he demanded everything from me and gave me nothing in return, so my cries for assistance were ignored, and any attempt to discuss how his behavior was affecting me was met with silence on both occasions. When I finally found the courage to ask Ron for a divorce, he became violent and physically harmed me. As if that wasn't enough, he then took away my wallet, phone, and car keys to make sure I couldn't leave our house without his consent. When I finally realized that something had to change, I realized that I couldn't continue to sacrifice myself for someone who treated me so horribly, and that I needed to leave this marriage before it destroyed me completely. He warned me that he would never let me divorce him, and that I would have to live with him forever and pay for everything no matter how miserable I was. However, the following day, while he was sleeping, I managed to get away and call the police from my neighbor's house. Fortunately, the police showed up, and Ron was taken into custody. Because this was his first offense, the court ordered him to take mandatory anger management classes, but that was the only punishment he received for his treatment of me. After much back and forth with him trying to delay, manipulate, and make things as difficult for me as possible, I finally got my wish and ended our divorce. I didn't take a dime from him, not because I didn't deserve to be compensated for everything I had been through, but rather because I wanted a fresh start where I could move on from the toxic chapter of my life. As soon as the divorce was finalized, I packed up my belongings and moved to a different city, far away from him. Since then, I have stopped communicating with Ron at all. I only told my parents tidbits about what I was going through at the time. Perhaps I was ashamed or trying to shield them from the truth. But only after the divorce was finalized and I had started to recover did I feel ready to be honest with them about everything that had happened with Ron. After 2 years of my divorce, my life has completely changed. I have a much better job than I did before, and I earn a solid income that allows me to live comfortably. It feels like I have finally regained control of my life and my future because I have a comfortable lifestyle and have been able to send some money back home to my parents. My parents were particularly heartbroken to learn what I had gone through all on my own, and my younger sister Karen seemed sympathetic. To save money on rent and other expenses, my sister Karen, a high school dropout with a history of substance use, continues to live with our parents. She manages to get clean and stabilize her life to some extent, but she still has a long way to go. I'm well aware that the money I send home also helps her out indirectly, and I'm okay with that because they are my family, and I want them to be happy for the rest of their lives without any financial stress. My parents called me this week with some big news, and I could hear the excitement in their voices, which piqued my interest. They told me that my sister Karen was getting married, and I was shocked because I didn't know she was dating anyone at all. Naturally, I asked who the lucky guy was, and after a lengthy pause, they nervously said that they needed me to promise not to overreact. When they told me more about the guy, I instantly felt sick to my stomach, wondering what could warrant such a thing. I thought there must have been some sort of error when they told me that Karen was getting married to my ex-husband, Ron. I was so shocked that I couldn't even process the news for a moment. I asked them if they were kidding, half expecting them to laugh and acknowledge that it was all a ridiculous prank, but my mother confirmed that this was true and that Karen and the family had refrained from telling me sooner because they knew I'd be upset. She continued by telling me that Karen and Ron had met by chance a few months prior when Ron had stopped by the diner where Karen works. What started as a friendly encounter quickly developed into a full-fledged romance between them, according to my mom, and it's only been a few months, but they're already completely in love with each other. It seemed like they wanted to soften the blow by delaying the delivery of this important news. I couldn't comprehend what I was hearing. Not only had Karen begun dating him, but she had also chosen to wed him, knowing full well that he was my ex and that he had caused me a great deal of suffering. And now Ron, the man who had made my life unbearable, was going to become my brother-in-law. How could my family believe this was even remotely acceptable? How could Karen defend her relationship with someone who had been so cruel to her sister? And why hadn't anyone felt the need to disclose? I sat on the phone in stunned silence as my mother continued to try to persuade me to accept them. She said that Ron seemed to have changed and that Karen believed in his ability to be a better person. Mom even mentioned how happy Karen looked, and maybe I should try to see this as a chance for a fresh start for everyone involved. However, I felt as though they had all conspired to keep me in the dark until it was too late for me to voice any concerns. I tried to convince my mother that Karen didn't know Ron's true identity and couldn't possibly know what kind of man he was until she would have to deal with the same trauma. I told her that she and her father should have talked sense into Karen's head to discourage her from pursuing a relationship with someone as harmful and toxic as him. To my surprise, my dad acknowledged that he had tried once or twice, but Karen had been adamant about her choice, so Mom dropped yet another bombshell when she disclosed that Ron had previously met with them for dinner and that, reportedly, he had concocted a ridiculous story about how I was to blame for our divorce. According to Ron, I had made his life difficult and had him arrested without cause. My mother then went on to tell me that it was unfair of me to hold Ron solely responsible for the divorce and suggested that I shoulder some of the blame as well. I was shocked that my mother would even consider this. My dad then chimed in, asking if I had moved on from Ron yet. He asked if I was still emotionally attached to him or something, which is why I was having trouble accepting his relationship with my sister. Of course, I had moved on, but this wasn't about moving on. It was about my sister bringing that toxic man back into our lives and my parents acting as though it was normal. That man had harmed me, And how could she, of all people, take his word over mine after everything I had confided in her? My mom encouraged me to let the past be the past, saying that I should be happy and supportive of my sister, especially since Karen had been too afraid to tell me about her relationship with Ron in the past. When I told my dad how much I felt, he responded infuriatingly, saying that if I had truly moved on, I shouldn't have a problem accepting their relationship. He claimed that Karen and Ron were adults, and if they wanted to get married, it was their decision and not ours. But now that they were getting married, they hoped that I would accept them and join in their celebration. Hearing this only made me more upset. My sister wasn't afraid because she thought I would be unreasonable. Rather, she was afraid because she knew deep down that this was wrong and that Ron had treated me badly, but she still chose to be with him. Now they were all trying to guilt me into being supportive, and I was so hurt and angry that I ended the call. Ever since, my phone has been exploding with texts and calls. My family is pressuring me to welcome this man back into my life, despite everything I've been through. Thank you to everyone for your kind comments. I'm glad I brought this to Reddit because I've received more support from strangers than I ever did from my family. Let me clarify that I'm not just horrified that Karen is planning to do this. My parents have been calling me selfish for not being happy for my sister. They've accused me of holding on to the past and refusing to see how Ron has supposedly changed. I'm completely stunned that she would marry Ron in the first place. He has caused me a great deal of pain and suffering. He blamed me for our child's miscarriage, as if I had any control over it. He didn't care enough to take me to the hospital when I was bleeding and scared. He physically hurt me when I tried to leave and threatened me if I dared to go against him. And he never made any meaningful contributions to our relationship or our home. And yet, knowing all of this, he drained me emotionally, physically, and financially. It's heartbreaking to think that my sister would even consider dating him, much less marrying him. How could she possibly justify being with someone like that, given everything he's done? What's worse is that Ron has somehow managed to get my parents and Karen to believe a distorted version of events in which he has made them believe that I was partially to blame. We've had our ups and downs, but as the oldest sibling, I've always felt a certain responsibility towards Karen. Even though we've had our ups and downs, I've always cared about her and wanted the best for her, which is why this situation is so painful for me. I can't stand by and watch her make the same mistakes I did, especially with a man as harmful and emotionally manipulative as him. I feel betrayed and hurt by my family right now, and I can't just turn my back on them without at least trying to talk some sense into them first. For this reason, I've decided to set up a video call with my parents and Karen sometime this week so that I can confront them directly about this situation and make sure they understand exactly what Ron is and what he's doing. She is as toxic as Ron, and no one deserves the kind of life I went through. This won't be an easy conversation. I know I'll encounter resistance, and there's a chance they won't listen to me, but I have to try for my peace of mind. I need to know that I did everything I could to prevent my sister from making this terrible mistake. If she still decides to proceed with this marriage, then at least I'll know that I tried. I'll remind them of everything I went through because of him, the abuse, the manipulation, and the trauma, and I'll try to convince them to see reason before it's too late. I tried my best, but the video call with my family didn't go as planned. In fact, it became a nightmare. I collected all the evidence I had, including the medical records that showed the harm I had endured at Ron's hands. I had never shown my family this before, but this time I wanted to provide them with indisputable proof of the anguish and suffering he had caused me, not to make it about myself, but to warn Karen about the kind of man she was dealing with. I laid everything out as calmly and clearly as I could, but Karen went on the defensive right away, claiming that Ron had suffered just as much as I had during our marriage and accusing me of being dramatic and trying to get attention through my past experiences. She told me how Ron had told her that I was the one who had provoked him and that I had been wrong to involve the police. My records detailed the years of trauma I endured and expressed my sincere fear that she might suffer the same fate. Karen made a deeply hurtful and shocking comment about my miscarriage after he physically assaulted me. She said that maybe it was for the best that I lost my baby with Ron because I wasn't meant to be his wife for a long time or a mother to his child. Hearing this was heartbreaking, and I couldn't believe that my sister could say something so unkind and dismissive to me about one of the most traumatic experiences of my life. However, I did notice that throughout the call, my parents primarily remained silent, and when they did talk, it was to try to calm us down rather than take a firm stand. I needed them to speak up for me and see the truth, but they seemed more interested in maintaining harmony and agreeing with my sister. My dad told me that they would closely monitor Ron to make sure he wouldn't hurt Karen the way he hurt me. I asked him how he would do that, and he told me that Ron was supposed to move in with them after he married Karen. I argued with Dad that this was a very bad idea, but Dad insisted that since it was his house, it was up to him and not me to decide who could or could not live there. He told me that since Karen and Ron didn't have a place of their own yet, it was the right decision for Ron to move into her room after the wedding, because they would be able to save money and my parents would be able to keep an eye on them. I told my parents that once they let him in, he would never leave because Ron is dependent on others. I asked my parents if they had considered this, if they really thought that Ron had changed, if they thought they could somehow manage him better than I could despite everything he had done to me. My mom dismissed my concerns, saying that maybe he wasn't as much in love with me as he was with my sister, and that perhaps this time he would be better. I scoffed, my frustration heating up, and I told my parents without hesitation. I told them that if this was how they were going to handle things, I couldn't stand by and watch. I'm against Ron and Karen's relationship, and I didn't want to be involved in it any longer. I told them that if they wanted to keep supporting their unhealthy relationship and let Ron live with them, then that was their decision, but going forward, I would be severing contact with them because I didn't want to be a part of a family that supported someone who had mistreated me. I'd also told them that I would no longer send them any money. Karen also argued that even if I wanted to stop talking to them, I should at least have the decency to continue sending them money. She mentioned that she was planning to quit her job and focus on becoming a stay-at-home wife for Ron, and that she needed my money more than ever because Ron still didn't earn enough. When my parents heard this, they started fighting with me right away, saying that it was unfair for me to cut them off as their child. The entitlement of it all was astounding. I made it clear that if she wanted to live that way, Ron should pay for it, not me. I shouldn't be responsible for supporting her decisions, especially after she married him. Karen then yelled at me, accusing me of punishing them out of envy. She claimed that I was cutting them off because she had ended up with Ron and that I was still stuck in the past. Her words felt like a slap in the face, but I refused to back down. I had sacrificed so much for them while they made poor decisions, but I refused to allow her and my parents to continue to control me. The more they quarreled, the more determined I became to cut them off, and I meant it since that conversation. I've completely severed my ties with my family, and the pain of it still lingers, but I know it was the right decision for me because what they did to me is unforgivable now, and I need to protect my peace, my sanity, and my future, even if that means walking away from the people I love. So, even though it's been 2 months since my last update, I want to thank everyone for their encouraging messages and comments. Alright, so I recently learned from some of my cousins that Karen and Ron had broken up. It appears that Karen caught him cheating a week before their wedding was scheduled, and based on what I've heard, she reacted very strongly. Given everything I know about Ron, it's really no surprise that he's dishonest, manipulative, and unfaithful, but I can't help but feel a small sense of validation that I was correct about him. He hasn't changed in any way. Since the breakup, my parents have been making every effort to contact me. They seem to have been pleading with my relatives to speak with me, hoping that they will persuade me to communicate with them. Now that Karen and Ron are getting married, they want to mend our differences and reintegrate me into their lives. But I'm sticking to my decision that I won't allow them back in because I'm pretty sure that's all they want. My life is going so much better now without my family. My career is thriving, and I've started dating someone new. I'm not willing to risk my peace just because my family is trying to make amends for their past behavior, and I've seen how quickly they turned against me to defend Ron and my sister. Their sudden change of heart has nothing to do with their concern for me. Rather, it's about their need to have me back in the fold, so I can continue to support them and my sister financially. Karen's poor choices led to this. If anyone is worried about my safety, don't be. I live in a secure apartment with cameras everywhere, so if Ron ever shows up, trust me, I'll get him arrested and make sure he is held accountable this time. It's been 6 months since my last update, and I'm not sure if anyone is still following along, but I wanted to let you know that my parents recently sent me an email stating that my dad had been in an accident and broke his hand. They're claiming that some of the medical bills aren't fully covered by insurance, and they seem to have fallen behind on some other bills now, and they want me to pay for everything. The sudden wave of apology they're throwing at me, though, doesn't surprise me in the least. It seems like they're realizing how wrong they were all those months ago and how they treated me unfairly for no reason. They even mentioned how they should have listened to me about Ron and how sorry they are. This isn't about their health or their bills. It's about them trying to manipulate me into giving them money again. So even after that email, I have decided not to respond, and I don't plan on doing anything about it. They were responsible for pushing me away and are acting like I owe them something because my dad got hurt. Where was their concern before when they sided with him over me? Oh, how convenient. Now that they need something, they finally acknowledge their mistakes. Too little, too late. I don't care anymore. They need to learn to solve problems on their own.